Hello, welcome to this week's new and very special episode of the Assembly Line, an NES Homebrew podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Kevin from Kahan Games.
I'm Beau from Soul Goose Productions.
And we're here not only to talk about homebrews, but we're here to talk about a homebrew competition today.
Yeah, so we are actually going to devote the next couple episodes to covering the 2018 nesdev competition, which is sort of a yearly gathering of projects and people to sort of see what's out there.
Yeah, and we've covered it briefly. We've touched on it in previous episodes, talking about, when the deadline is, and we've briefly touched on a couple projects, but we're going to go into a little bit more depth with each entry this time. We're going to talk to some of the developers themselves, sort of figure out what their inspirations were, what the processes was like, and we're going to meet some new people.
Yeah, I'm very excited. So what are your general thoughts on the competition, Kevin? What is the competition to you?
I guess I'll start from the beginning. When the competition started back in 2011, it primarily sort of took place on the nesdev forums, and I've never been a strong presence over there, so it was sort of outside my little bubble of things that I was going to be doing. So I paid attention to the entries and sort of, saw who is coming in to do things. But as the years have gone on and it's been a little bit more, I don't want to say it's been more inclusive, because I think, the way they've gone about doing things is pretty much, the same as it's been in prior years. But I think that, since each subsequent year is sort of pulling in stronger and stronger entries, I think it's become more of, it's more on people's radar now. So I was very happy to be a part of it this year and submit, nothing good can come of this. But to make a long story short, and I apologize for being wordy here, the nesdev competition to me is an event that brings people together from within and from without the community with one goal, and that is to make something on the Nintendo, be it a game or a tech demo or anything really.
Yeah, that is one of the neat things about the competition, is it does give you that hard deadline, so something has to be submitted by a certain date, and it's done, like in some form, whether it gets expanded later or whether, there's bugs in it or whatever, at least in some form it is being released. And then they, of course, do a cartridge with this, so project actually gets out there, and it's interesting to me for many reasons, but particularly in the fact that it gets things finished.
Yeah, and there was some sort of speculation on, between the people that entered that, like you said, when the deadline comes, you're submitting your game, bugs and all. And since there's a little bit of a delay between when the competition ends and when the cartridge comes out, people were debating, like, can we fix bugs in this time? Or when we release the cartridge, should it be a true representation of the games as they were submitted at the deadline? So there was interesting discussions to be had, and we talked to Brad coming up, to delve into that question a little bit and on his thoughts. But it's been a very interesting sort of process, seeing people's work over time and how it sort of transformed into actually what they submitted.
And it's interesting too, because the nesdev competition actually brings out people who want to share their opinions and who have opinions about things, and they bicker back and forth about this or that, but in the end it's because they actually care. And so it's a big community gathering. It's shaped by the people who are in it, and it changes every year based on who's there. So what have sort of some of the past highlights of the competition been in your mind?
So the one that comes to mind immediately is streamers, and that was the big one. Was it on last year's cartridge or the year before
That's
that?
on the 2011 cartridge, the original volume.
Holy cow, has it been that long?
Well, no, because it came out after the fact, but the cartridge wasn't released till 14.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's still been around a while, wow. But that game was actually just featured on the Homebrew Players competition, right?
Yeah, it was the February entry.
A couple of the big names, the big projects that have sort of come out on Kickstarters within the last year, like Twin Dragons, and Nebs and Debs, like those sort of got their inceptions in prior years for the competition, right?
Yeah, that's one of the new things that we've sort of seen with the competition, is that people have been submitting very full engines, and they can see the light at the end of the tunnel, but they don't quite have the time to finish the full game, so they do a very polished couple level demo that sort of has all the pieces, and it's a way to show off a project early, and it's still a complete game. They're still treated as sort of full entries.
And it's not only like games that are entered into the competition, there's a whole category for non-game type things, right?
Category 2 covers utilities and sort of other projects that don't fit the standard game format, I guess.
Yeah, and a lot of times the projects that are submitted to Category 2 are sort of more interesting to me than, the ones in Category 1, because it's such a catch-all sort of non-game type category that people are a lot of times even more creative in what they're doing in that category than they were if they were just making a normal game.
Well, another interesting thing about the competition and the competition cartridge is that between that time, other things get added to it that were not actually submitted to the competition. So beyond bug polishing and stuff like that, something like streamers actually got added onto the cart after the fact. And so it's a way to get things published that would not normally be published, and that's kind of a great service to the community.
Yeah, plus if you submit an entry, don't they give you a free cartridge?
Yeah, you actually get a limited cartridge, sort of the limited edition version, and in 2014, the Volume 1, that was sold to the public, but then the next one was only given to participants. You couldn't actually buy the cartridge any other way.
So like I previously mentioned, the competition sort of brings a lot of different types of people sort of into the fold. There are people that are sort of mainstays in the community that you see pop up pretty often, but every year it seems like there's a few people that sort of show up out of the blue that you haven't heard of before, and they are doing this amazing work, and it's really exciting to see.
Oh yeah, you'll see stuff from old-time nesdevers like Teppels or the Fox, and then you'll see brand new stuff from people like Zutano, who we're going to talk to next episode.
Yep, it's really exciting, and it seems like every year, the community is only getting bigger and bigger, and I think this sort of competition is sort of a very big catalyst in that regard, because it's sort of giving you a goal, and it's sort of when people are showing up to nesdev and they're posting about their projects and their updates as they're working on things, it really does sort of pull people in to give critiques and give suggestions, and it becomes sort of a big community thing.
Well, the public side of the nesdev competition is, I think, one of the big draws, because they do there's a whole sub forum on the forums, and people can talk about what they're doing, and they can also then pull in collaborators. If somebody needs an artist, they just put up a post that says, I'm looking for an artist or a musician or somebody to do this part of the code or whatever, and it becomes this great sort of melting pot of ideas and creativity, and the projects get stronger because of it.
Yeah, and the projects have gotten really strong. I mean, you mentioned graphics. Graphics in particular, I think this year are sort of the highlight. I think it's the pinnacle of NES sort of art that I've seen, definitely in the competition, but maybe, overall homebrew. They've done some really good work, and you see a lot of the same names sort of popping up in multiple, from multiple projects.
Yeah, there was even jokes that this year's competition should be called the Franken Graphics Competition. Sort of like how this first one was the Streamers one.
Yeah. Well, she deserves it. She does some awesome work.
Yeah, anyways. So this year's competition had 13 entries. They covered sort of a variety of genres and types. There were no Category 2 entries, at least not yet. Sometimes those get tacked on after. I guess we'll just run down the list real quick, give you sort of an idea of what to expect in terms of what we're going to be talking about, but we're going to leave most of the conversation this episode and next to the actual developers. We've sort of decided to ask them sort of a standardized list of questions, so that way you can really compare answers and ideas and thoughts across the different participants. And not everybody could be interviewed, sadly. Various language things or just time. Or life, stuff. But so in those instances, Kevin and I will talk a little bit about them, but we're not really doing reviews like we often do. This is more just a chance to sort of expose the projects as much as possible.
And I don't know about you, but personally, as a game developer, I don't think that I, a lot of times, have a platform to me to stand up on my soapbox and sort of give people a rundown of what inspired me to make my game. So I think giving everyone an opportunity to talk about their projects individually, I think it's great, because I don't think that I've had a lot of opportunities to do that. So I'm thankful that we sort of have a platform to bring people on and talk about their stuff.
Yeah, so the games that were entered, I'll just quickly go through them. There was Star Evil, kind of a remake of an Action 52 game. That was by Pubby, and he also entered another game called F to FF, which was a racing game. There's Gruniozerca by MT and Lucas Kerr. There was Jammin' Honey by Dougeff, which was sort of a little platform arcade type game. Project Blue, which was a single screen platformer, not like Battle Kid. But like Battle Kid in that regard. And there was Wolfling by Lazy Cow, which was sort of a very atmospheric platformer. Kind of a fun, well, we'll get to that later. Inherent Smile broke some new grounds with sort of a pseudo 3D engine, which was very interesting.
Oh yeah.
My DAO by the Mojang twins. It's subtitled Cheryl's Nightmare. It continues their saga of Cheryl, which they've done on Genesis and NES. Robo Ninja Climb was submitted by Nathan Tolbert, and that is a sort of a vertical scrolling, jumping. I'm sure there's an actual name for it. It's not an endless jumper, but it could have been. Light Shields was done by Zutano, which is sort of like a Pong meets space. Almost a space Pong, I'd say. I couldn't resist. And then...
My game.
Oh, yeah, and can't forget your game, which was Nothing Good Can Come of This, which is a two-player fighting game, which Kevin and I have had the joy of observing at MagFest the last couple times. And then Thomas of Spoony Bard Productions, he submitted 2 games, part of his Eskimo Bob Alfonso series. They're both Alfonso games. And even though these games eventually get released onto a competition cartridge, you can actually go download them all right now. They're free to download, free to play. You can interact with the developers on nesdev or Nintendo Age, and yeah, jump in. It's a community event, so be a part of it.
Yeah, and they're like all over the spectrum of genres and art styles. It's been really, really fun.
Yeah, and we're going to split these across 2 episodes. There's just too much content because we wanted to let people, chat away if they want to. Sorry to interrupt the regular schedule, but yeah, this competition's never quite been covered like this, and we're pretty excited for it.
Absolutely. So who do we got first?
So Project Blue had like 2 songs that I really couldn't decide between, and we are going to do the title screen for Project Blue real fast, and then we'll play the level 1 track later. But after that, we are going to talk with Nathan Tolbert this time, MT, Brad Bateman, who helps facilitate the competition, Dougeff, who did Jammin' Honey, and then Toggle Switch, who did Project Blue. That'll be sort of our lineup this time, and then next time we will get to the rest. So here is the title track from Project Blue. The homebrew community is interesting because oftentimes folks will sort of pop in for a year or two, finish a project, come and go, stick with one system and whatnot. But every once in a while, we get someone who's been around for years and years and has programmed for various systems and whatnot. We're going to talk with Nathan Tolbert, who entered this year's nesdev competition. But I actually remember reading about him back in like 04, 05 when I was trying to learn Game Boy Advance programming. And so it was very strange for me the first time I met him. This person who was just, I'm in my dorm room trying to figure out how to Game Boy program, which I never did. And just sort of interesting. So I guess I'm going to let him talk a little bit about himself, though. Nathan, who are you?
Hey guys, how you doing?
First, he's going to correct the pronunciation of his last name.
I think you said it right, Tolbert, so I think you said it right this time.
Oh, well, imagine that.
Yeah, we're doing homebrew for various things for a little while. Like you said, started with Game Boy Advance back in 2004, 2005, something like that. Made a game for that and for Nintendo DS, and then from there did a project for an Android game, and then tried my hand at Atari 2600, and now I'm trying to learn NES development, so this has been fun.
Are you a programmer by trade by chance?
Yeah, I started off when I was a kid, got a computer for Christmas one year and started programming on it and loved it, so went to school to computer science, and now I'm writing software for the University of Illinois, and in my spare time trying to crank out games.
All right, so tell us a little bit about the game that you entered into the contest. First, tell us the title, and then sort of describe the gameplay style.
So this game, Robo Ninja Climb, is what I called it. Originally, it was going to be kind of one of these endless climber type of games, like the chintzy games you'd find on your cell phone nowadays. So you're a little robot guy, you're scaling walls in a kind of a big kind of, not tunnel, what's the word, pit type thing, and trying to avoid spikes. So it's kind of just a timing and action game. It ended up not being an endless thing. I ended up putting levels in it instead, but kind of just a real quick dodge the spikes, climb the thing, and trying to get out game.
Huh. You entered last year's competition as well with the 4-player game Spacey McRacy. How was that experience overall, and sort of how did it shape your entry when you went to do one this year?
Well, this year I originally wasn't even planning on doing anything. I had written Spacey McRacy kind of as a test to see, hey, can I do this next development thing? And then I started into a bigger project. And then come about November, I suddenly sat down and said, I want to make a game for this thing after all. It'd be nice to enter something into the competition. You get a free cart if you enter something, and so I'd like to do that. So I kind of at the last minute, I said, well, what can I make that I can kind of churn out kind of quickly? I have this Robo Ninja character from my Android game laying around, and I said, well, I can do something where he's just going through a different little adventure and try to scrap it together pretty quick. So that was kind of my goal.
You said you threw it together pretty quickly. How long ago did you start working on it? And what language did you program it in?
I did it mostly in C. I started kind of at the beginning in November, and then by Thanksgiving I said, that's mostly done other than a little bit of testing and polishing.
Wow.
In the bigger game I'm working on, I'm kind of trying to do a mix of assembly and C, so it was kind of nice to sit down and say, can I do this game mostly in C or not? And it turned out pretty well. There's a few routines I had to go back and rewrite completely because they were horrible the way they wanted to do it in C, but it worked out pretty well.
So you said about a month is what it took you?
Yeah, I think so.
Nice.
And you said it was mostly inspired from cell phone games?
Yeah, kind of. That, and also there was a homebrew game for the Atari 2600 called Wall Jump Ninja. And it ended up being a fairly different sort of game than Robo Ninja Climb was, but I kind of looked at it and said, well, this was fun. What made it fun? And tried to capture a little bit of that.
So how did you come up with the title? And tell us basically how you came up with the Robo Ninja dude.
So the Robo Ninja dude started back on an Android game. I wanted to make a game for Android, and I kind of wanted to make a Metroidvania type game because I'm kind of obsessed with those. But I always get frustrated on the phone because the controls are so awful. And so everybody, they do these endless runners where it's tap to jump. And I said, well, what if you made a game where it was a tap to jump Metroidvania, where the way you explored was you had to bounce off a wall to go the other way. And so it's all big tap to jump world. And I tried to think, what kind of character would run through a world like this? And I was like, well, it'd be this little ninja, but he's a robot because you can't control him. He just goes forward. And so I came up with this robot ninja guy. And then the artist that helps me with Anguna, he drew up the little sketch of this guy on the little wheel and gave him to me. So I said, well, that's perfect. So because I had the graphics for him laying around, I decided to use him for this new game.
Ah, yes, the very talented Chris Hildenbrand, if I'm correct.
Yes. Yep, that's right.
Name drop.
He's quite talented.
Well, I came across some of his stuff month or two ago and was just like, wait a second, I know this name. And sure enough, I went back and I was like, oh, he did the Anguna art. Look at that.
Yep. He's been doing all sorts of stuff recently, but I'm not sure what. I haven't been in touch with him for a few years.
So we know about like sort of the deadline influence that it had on the project, but did the choice of mapper with the competition have any effect on things?
Not really. I mean, because I wanted to do a fairly simple game, it wasn't a problem at all putting it into the mappers that they required. When I did Spacey McRacy last time, I didn't do any banking or anything like that. And this time I needed, 2 CHR banks, graphics banks, because I was using the large sprite. So to get all of his animations in there, I had to use a couple banks of graphics, but really the limitations of the mapper wasn't a problem.
That is a huge sprite, too. I'm not used to seeing those on the NES.
That was one of the fun things, was figure out how big I can make him and still make the game playable.
Do you know of a bigger playable character on any Nintendo game?
This guy from Astyanax is pretty big. I'm not sure how he compares.
Huh.
I know the one in Neotoxin, the homebrew that Snowbro did many, many moons ago, or tried to do. It was very large, but not. I don't think as wide as your Robo Ninja.
He's massive.
Yeah, this one's 4 or 5 wide. There's that new homebrew that just came out with that runner game where there's some Amazon lady that runs through the jungle that had incredible animation with a giant character.
Oh, was that
Indivisible?
the one that Kasumi did?
No, it was some Japanese company, I think.
Oh, the Kira Nightstar games.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was pretty big.
I think. I don't know.
A lot of sprites going on there, too. So, are there any particular NES games that you can see as having influenced this, or mostly just modern stuff?
For this particular game, it was mostly that Atari game that I mentioned and then kind of the modern cell phone games, really.
Okay.
Although I kept, when I was playing it, I kept getting pictures of the Battletoads. They're going downwards instead of upwards, where you're going down the thing on the second level, trying to dodge the birds and the little zappy things.
Any technical effects or anything that you sort of borrowed from other things? Or learned from, I should say?
The only interesting technical effect, I think, was the spikes at the bottom. I had a Sprite Zero hit bobbing up and down to kind of look like they're, chomping forward at you, which was kind of fun to do. But, I mean, technically it wasn't that interesting, but it's the first time I had done kind of a moving Sprite Zero, which made it fun to do. I locked up my game quite a few times messing with that.
Were you hoping to accomplish anything specific with the game, either programming-wise or in terms of life goals, like finishing something? I don't know.
Really, it was the two main goals, kind of as I mentioned, were just, I would love to enter something in this competition, and I want to see if I can do it fast. I told my wife, I'm kind of in this 3 or 4 weeks, buckle down, put the kids to bed, I'm going to crank out a game. And so it was kind of fun to see. I can actually make a playable game that's kind of fun in a few weeks, which normally they take me 3 years, literally, so it was kind of nice to have something in a short amount of time.
Yeah, it seems like you accomplished both of the goals that you set out to do.
Yeah, so I was pretty happy with it.
I think you just gave me a goal to accomplish. I'm on the 4-year project schedule.
Well, that's good. That's similar to 3 years.
So you used various assets from around the community on your project, it looked like from the credits. Sort of what was that process like? Did anybody have sort of a more active hand, or were they sort of independent resources that you sort of pulled together?
Mostly it was pulling things together. I had the character graphics from Chris Hildenbrand. I'm always looking out on Open Game Art for cool graphics, and Cert has those amazing NES graphics, so I pulled some backgrounds in from him. I just did some searching for some cool fonts and found, I don't even remember who made it. I'd love to credit that guy, and it's in the credits, but I don't remember right now. I made this cool computer-looking font.
It was Woman. He is administering nesdev, I think, currently.
Oh, well, there you go. I didn't even realize that.
From what I hear. Yeah, and that font's awesome. I should have taken it for Robo or Spookatron.
So really, yeah, it was mostly just going out and grabbing things. I had the guy that was doing music for the Haunted Halloween games. I talked to him for a while, but it didn't come together for including his music on there, so I had to use my terrible song that gets really repetitive.
Oh, we're going to play it in just a second. It's not repetitive at all.
If you'll only play a short snippet, it's not too bad.
Will do.
Did you encounter any sort of specific hurdles along the way, or did everything go pretty smooth?
I mean, the thing that always gets me on vertical scrolling games is the seam between the 240 pixels of screen size and things being 256 pixels when you're doing nice even math. So that hit me a number of times. I'd be off by 16 pixels in my collisions because something had advanced to a different screen, and that probably took more time than anything else. But other than that, it was pretty smooth.
Huh. Is there anything you sort of would have done differently in hindsight, either in terms of mechanics, features, or just your working process as a whole?
The biggest thing probably would have more variety in obstacles and enemies. I originally had ideas of things falling from the sky and things shooting in different directions, and I kind of just by the end, I was like, I don't even know how to make this fun. And so I kind of dialed back on some of that and said, I don't know if it's going to make it any more fun or less fun, so I'll just leave it as it is.
So obviously you had the success of meeting your goals, finishing a game, entering into the contest. Has there been any sort of other successes that you would consider that have happened, like from entering the game? Like, have you got a lot of feedback? Do you feel a nice sense of accomplishment from it?
I mean, I definitely feel that sense of accomplishment. I haven't actually gotten that much feedback about it. Early on when I posted some builds, I got a little bit of feedback, but since the competition's been going, I haven't heard much about it. Really, what was the most fun is right before Christmas, I took my Nintendo into work and loaded a game on it and said, hey, everybody, come into my office and help me test this thing. And so it's always fun getting people to sit down and just bang through your game and tell you what they like and what they don't like and have fun with it and watch them die 1,000 times. See who's good at Nintendo and who's bad at Nintendo.
And your friends probably are used to you having made games, throughout your life. But I remember, like, when I first started and I would bring something I made in front of my friends and be like, hey, play this. And they'd be like, wait,
yeah.
You made this? And I'd be like, yeah. And they couldn't comprehend.
Well, especially since it was playing on hardware. People have seen, like, okay, you can make a game. But when you pull out the old Nintendo and say, okay, try my game, it's kind of fun.
For sure.
Yeah. Do you have any plans to expand Robo Ninja Climb past the competition, or is this sort of it for the life of the game?
That's probably it. I mean, I don't know. I might come back later and get inspired and try to add some more levels and things. But right now I've got my head down doing this kind of Metroidvania game that I'm working on now, and it's taking up all my spare time. So that and an Atari project that I'm kind of working on at the same time.
I know your NES project looks amazing, and we will.
Well, that's all thanks to Franken-Graphics making it look good.
Well, but you've got quite a bit of design in there too. It's almost like Blaster Master-esque.
That's the goal. Back when I made Inguna back in 2005, I said I'm either going to make the Zelda game or I'm going to make a Blaster Master game, and I ended up making a Zelda game. But I wanted to do the Blaster Master one since 15 years ago. So.
Dang, that's awesome. Well, I'm super excited. We'll have to chat more about that in a future episode.
Thanks, yeah.
All right, we appreciate you coming on, Nathan. We mentioned we were going to play the not at all repetitive song from your game, so we're going to let everyone listen to that right now. So I appreciate you coming on.
Excellent.
So as we've seen, the nesdev competition is sort of a great time to find collaboration with projects and sort of pull people together to work on different things. And often we cross international lines, we cross genre lines, different things that people are interested in. But we are actually going to speak now with MT, one of the graphics artists from project this year, at least one project. We'll find out if there's more. And yeah, you there, MT?
Yeah, man, I'm here.
Awesome. So I guess you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, sort of what you've done in the past. What do people in the community sort of know you for, that type of thing?
I don't know, man. I guess folks would probably know me best for making sure that Isolation didn't come out 2 years ago and is still in works.
I wasn't going to go there.
When that game comes out, it's going to be awesome.
Indeed it is. Other than that, let's see. Beau, for you, I did box art for Swords and Runes, regular edition.
And the map.
And the map there.
Oh, yeah. Such a good map.
I think probably the most attention we've gotten so far, Lucas Kerr and myself, we released Cowlet Gamer's second adventure last year.
Oh, was he the programmer on that?
He is. Man, that guy is wild. He's
What
he's
do you
done
mean?
a lot of games. Like just the rate that he can put stuff out and the quality he can get it at. Like I try to keep up with him on the art level, and I'll put something together and I'll send him an idea, and 15, 20 minutes later, he's just like, how's this? And sends me a ROM back.
Wow.
And, it's like that or time zone difference. Like I'll send him something and go to bed and I'll wake up and something's done. And so that guy's done a lot of stuff.
So you saying I need to get on his level for isolation?
No, I can't even keep up with him if you were working that fast. But, no, we did that together, and then that's for Cowlet's charity fundraiser and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the one that John Hancock puts on.
Yeah.
Or the immortal John Hancock puts on.
He messaged me a while back, and he was like, I'm putting together a puzzle platformer for a Polish charity event, which Lucas is from Poland, and he was like, it's going to be real small, and I want to use some open game art for most of the stuff, but I need some sprites for a guinea pig. Would you be willing to do it? And considering that he had spent 18 months programming CGA2 from a pitch that I sent him, I was just like, yeah, I'd do it. But
wow,
Kevin, when I get on a project, it's hard for me to not take on more responsibilities,
No, man. Like, I mean, when we started working together on Isolation, I don't even remember, my memory is awful, but I don't even remember sort of how we got introduced or like started working together. But, I had no idea what to expect, but everything that you sort of started suggesting from the start, like it was all amazing. So like I was totally cool with you sort of bringing whatever you wanted to the project. So, I mean, your talent sort of speaks for itself at this point, I'd say.
Well, thank you there. Talent and, development time, I guess, is the main cost of it.
But I don't want to talk about myself the whole time. What games are you involved with, and how the hell do you pronounce them?
Just two. Let's see here. So, Gruniozerca is the guinea pig puzzle game that Lucas and I are doing, and I'm practicing my Polish pronunciation, trying to get those letters right, and I'm still too shy to even say Lucas's name with the Polish pronunciation there. But
you're doing better than me.
Well, at least you're not saying Lucas.
No, yeah, I knew you were going to do it.
Yeah,
Kevin.
It'd actually be. I'm pretty sure it'd be Łukasz.
Oh wow,
that's much more elegant than I was thinking.
I've been talking to him so long, and the voice in my head was always just Lucas from it, so it's weird for me to just say Łukasz out loud. But
wow,
and I'm probably wrong on that too, mispronouncing it. But so the guinea pig game, Gruniozerca 2, and the Project Blue from Franken Graphics and nesdev member Toggle Switch.
Yeah.
I don't have much to do with the version that's released for nesdev, but Franken Graphics got in touch with me, and I'll be doing box art and illustration for the final release of that when it comes up.
Oh, cool. What kind of projects have you sort of been involved with in the past in regards to the competition itself?
For last year's competition, I wasn't involved to begin with, but after the entries were released, I got pretty excited about them. There were a lot of really good ones last year, and there are good ones every year.
Oh, yeah.
So I volunteered to do the box art and design for last year's, for the Action 53 Volume 3 release. And it's been held up a little bit on... it was held up on my end last year for a bit as we tried to coincide it with some other printing, and then held up a little on Infinite NES Lives, but last I heard, he's trying to get all those put out this week, maybe. Waiting on some updates.
Okay, which will probably be like last week after the podcast is done, so go buy that now.
Hopefully.
Yeah. So that was fun. Did all those illustrations, and there were a lot of titles to represent there. was it like 20, 21 titles, not just from the competition. Yeah, but everything that went into the multi-cart. So it was fun trying to get all of those titles represented in one illustration equally, you know?
Last year was a good turnout, yeah.
So you mentioned that one of the 2 games you worked on was Gruniozerca 2. Can you describe the gameplay style a little bit for the people that aren't familiar?
Yeah, Gruniozerca 2 is a puzzle platformer. In the game, you play as a guinea pig. The guinea pig's owner has been lost in their family cellar. And as the guinea pig, you must travel through each room to go find the guinea pig's owner, who was apparently locking all the doors behind him as he was traveling through the cellar and leaving the key on the opposite side for the guinea pig to find. But its main gameplay mechanic is finding and placing blocks.
So, excuse my ignorance, this game's a sequel? Like there was an original?
Yeah, I guess that's going to be my thing now. What was it? Cowlitz Gamer's Adventure came out, and the only thing I did on the first one was the box art, and then the second one, definitely, Lucas and I worked on that on probably equal parts, and he put out this game, Gruniozerca, last year. It's an annual charity event put on by Arhan.eu. It's called Gramitativnie, and they raise money each year for a cause. And last year he had put out this game, Gruniozerca, and it's a basic kind of arcade-ish. You control the guinea pig, you move left to right at the bottom of a screen, and you're catching falling carrots.
So like it was on the NES then?
Right, that was a NES title.
Oh, wow.
I believe later someone ported it to the C64.
Awesome.
Huh. I don't usually miss one like that big. I'm excited to go do some research.
Yeah, it's a fun thing to Google. It's not a very large game. For the original event, that first one, when they auctioned off, I think, a few copies of it for the event, and the highest winner got the rights to the source, and he put it up on GitHub.
No kidding.
Wow.
Download, the ROM's free to download there, and I think you can check out the source and everything too, if I'm not mistaken, as well.
That's awesome.
Man, I've apparently been like shut away in a closet for the last year. So sort of do you know when work on the project sort of began, and sort of when did you come on board in that process?
Well, Lucas messaged me in November, late November, and from the looks of the build he had and the pace he works at, I assumed it was something he had worked on a couple of days before he messaged me. And he had the main gameplay mechanic pretty much down. He knew that in the game you wanted to be able to collect kind of Tetris-shaped blocks for platforming and then place them, and then have a tool that can then remove them. And that was what he had when he came to me.
So had like the hammer been decided on, or was like sort of the finer details sort of a collaborative process?
The visual theme hadn't yet been decided on.
Oh, wow. Okay.
There was a guinea pig, and he was using kind of some dungeon graphics for a cellar. Like definitely had a more medieval feel to the background.
Medieval guinea pigs.
Yeah. And he was wanting to put it out real soon, much faster than we did. And, as I tend to do, asked to do a few more things for him and extend the development time a little bit. So I got the guinea pig graphics done, and then I was like, I'd really like it if I could do the background art too. It'd be better for me to just have my credits there for the whole game and have a cohesive visual style to it,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It really does have that cohesive visual style too. I mean, you kind of do some different things with sort of the title screen and sort of the narrative kind of things in between, and then just the actual game graphics themselves. They all mesh very well, and they're very sort of distinct.
Oh, well, thank you. One of the things that I really keep in mind when I'm working is color choice and cohesive palettes.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you were to open it up and with a PPU viewer and check out palette, you'll notice that half of our background palette never changes.
Interesting.
The two sub palettes that are used to represent all of the chew toy blocks, all of the blocks that you place, they're the two sub palettes that are used for all of the title screen and the quote screens and stuff.
Man,
So when you took over with the background graphics, after you sort of took ownership of them, did you recreate kind of what he was already using, or did you sort of go in your own unique direction to come up with your own sort of setting for things?
I started off by trying to recreate what he was using, and I wasn't really digging the way it was coming out. Not only did it have like a medieval dungeon theme to it, but it also the edge of the graphics, they kind of faded out to the black of the outside screen, like when you had a smaller room on the screen than the size of the screen. Lately, I've been playing a lot of games from Android developer Adventure Islands. Are you familiar with their games? They did Heartstar, Duke Dashington.
No.
I don't play anything new hardly.
Yeah, I don't play a ton of mobile games.
They have these really good games on Android and iOS both, and they're one of the few developers that are putting out like retro style games that take advantage of the system well and feel correct, instead of, I don't know, a lot of the new retro style games that are being developed just feel off and a little uncomfortable, but they're great. Anyway, sorry. He has a specific graphical style that he uses in his games, and I like the way he did lighting on the walls and edges of his puzzles. So I definitely used his games as an inspiration for the background graphics, I would say.
Were there any NES games that sort of influenced your style on this particular one?
Honestly, not really. Subconsciously, I'm sure there are plenty of them. But maybe Prince of Persia would be the first thing that would come to mind.
Ooh, nice. Yeah, the animation is very fluid in comparison to that, I'd say, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's the main inspiration from there, yeah. He'd come to me and the game has no enemies, it has no projectiles, it has nothing sprite-wise on the screen that isn't controlled by the developer, the position of it. So we don't have to worry that much about scanline resources and whatnot. So I was like, well, I'll do this guinea pig sprite, but if it's the only character in the game, let's use a whole pattern table for him.
Oh wow.
Nice. It's like let's give him a lot of frames of animations and transitions between, and things like I'd sketched out some stuff on graph paper, and I'm like, oh, I think it'd be cool when he goes to the edge if he kind of teeters and looks scared, and then like flips and tumbles when you have to climb down, and then later Lucas added that amazing just like slide whistle sound effect when he's falling. Man, love it.
It does have like way more frames than almost any other NES game that I've seen.
And you could achieve that with like character RAM and still have other characters and stuff, but and even there were some animations I had wanted to put in there that we decided to cut, and he was like, well, we're using character RAM, I can swap them out and put them in there, and I was just like, no, like let's leave it at one pattern table to keep from extending the development time more,
Yeah, it's sort of a tough call to make, but sometimes one you have to. I think it's interesting when developers or artists are more influenced by sort of modern games and it gets put back into the NES's life than the other way around. So it's interesting to hear.
I have to apologize for forgetting one. You asked about NES influences, and a huge one was Filthy Kitchen from Dust Mop from last year's nesdev competition.
I haven't.
No, I haven't seen that.
You throw the fly swatter? Oh, well, it would be of particular interest to you. I think I'd remembered some talk on the previous podcast episodes about a game where you would need to throw a hat. Was it a Gatsby game? Is that right?
All right, let's wrap this up. Gotta go.
But the way that you would describe that mechanic of throwing the hat and it coming back to you, like that's the key thing on Dust Mop's Filthy Kitchen. You have this fly swatter and you throw it and it like boomerangs around, and if you duck so that it misses you, it keeps boomeranging back around, so you rack up these combo points.
Damn it, that's exactly what I need, Beau. That's exactly what I need.
Well, I'm not going to finish it now, so you can go talk to Dustin.
All right.
But anyway, last year on the nesdev competition, they were posting progress, and I contacted Dustin on it and given some feedback on the graphics, and he had sent me a build of the ROM, and I was doing a checkout on it and checking things out and making suggestions like, oh, you could do this here and you could do that there. And I was playing through and I realized that his food items just looked amazing. They looked like these little 16-bit sprites floating around in NES games. So when I checked it out in the PPU viewer, I found out that all of his food items, they're 2 sprites overlaid over each other.
Ah.
Oh, yeah, that'll do it.
And the result is that he has this really nice, like a double outline on the sprites. It has a black outline and a white outline, so it doesn't matter what part of the background it shows up on. They pop really well, and then they have a few extra colors. So I messaged him early in development after I put together the carrot graphics for Gruniozerca, and I was just like, hey, man, you know that filthy kitchen item style, I'd really like to use it on this new game coming up if you don't mind.
Was he cool with it?
He was real cool with it.
Nice.
And that's another thing. You wouldn't be able to do it if you weren't controlling your scanline usage real heavily. Like a lot of our items are 3 tiles wide, even though they're only 8 or 10 pixels wide.
Dang, I hadn't thought of doing white outlines like that.
Yeah, that's cool.
Very, very clever.
It's nice.
So when you set out doing the graphics for this project, were you hoping to accomplish anything specific, either graphics-wise or in terms of goals?
2 main goals, and I think I've talked about them both already. One was just I wanted really fluid animation with a lot of like a visual character to him. I wanted the character to feel like a character and not just someone you're controlling in a game. You know what I mean? Like facial expressions.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like when you watch like 3D fighting games and like their faces don't change expression when they're doing things.
They really don't.
Actually, what was it? There's a new Mega Man coming out, like a Mega Man 11, I guess. And it's 2.5D game or whatever. And,
those, yeah.
And as I was watching the video of it, it's the first thing that stuck out to me is that the times that Mega Man's facial expression changed are really rare. So it's like controlling an action figure, like playing with dolls, So facial expressions were something I wanted to do.
Did you encounter any hurdles along the way that sort of held you back at all, or did everything kind of go smoothly?
I would say the biggest hurdle, and I guess a challenge, the biggest challenge we had was level design, which that was something that stretched out CGA 2, Cowlitz Gamer's second adventure, when we were first working on it, as I had put together a mock-up and just sent to Lucas, and I was just like, hey, man, if you were to ever do a sequel, I think it'd be cool to do it like this. And he's just like, yeah, put together the graphics. I'll put together a ROM. And, later I was just like, how about some co-op? And he's just like, yeah, put together graphics for a second player. I'll put together some co-op. And then I was just like, I think making it longer would be better. So the first CGA was like, it was 8 screens and they looped on 4 difficulties. And I was like, what if we did 24 or maybe even 48 screens? And he was like, yeah, design the levels and I'll put it together. And then suddenly I realized I'd never done level design before.
Not so easy.
Yeah. So, there were a lot of weeks last year I spent reading up on platformer design and stage design and things like that. And I got really into it. Graph paper by my side all the time, designing levels all throughout the day. And level design, we had altogether 54 stages in that game. And the level design definitely was like, I'd say 70% of development time. I don't know. It was a lot of time.
Puzzle platformers especially.
Yeah, which even CGA 2, it visually looks like an arcade platformer, but in terms of gameplay, it's more puzzle-based because there's no combat and everything is on like a set pattern you go around. But for Gruniozerca, Lucas was like, oh, I'll put together the levels. And, I thought that was fun because then when we were finished, I'd be able to play it and all the puzzles would be new to me, And
yeah.
Suddenly, a few weeks into development time, he's just like, man, with the players can put blocks anyway, designing stages for this is really hard. You have to have a puzzle. You have to have like a solution and then other optional solutions. You can't just have one solution to every puzzle or it's not going to be that fun. You have to balance like how many solutions there are to each puzzle. And it was challenging from the freedom we were giving the player. So and I told him, I said, well, let me take a crack at it. I've been reading up a lot, watching, Mark Brown's YouTube videos. You ever watch those YouTube videos, gameplay?
I don't really watch YouTube.
Game Maker's Toolkit, I think is what it's called. Reading up on some of that stuff. And So I was like, I'll put together the rest of the stages too. He had the first 6 stages done then. And, putting together, sometimes I'd work for a day on a stage and I'd have it all penciled out on paper, and then I'd put it together and I'd have this real elaborate solution planned, and I'd send it to Lucas and he'd send me back like an FCUX movie, and he'd beat it in like, 11 seconds because of something I'd looked over. One of the things we added in there to make that easier, as you progress a bit in the game, you'll find that there are some background bars, like barred windows in the basement. And where there are barred windows, you can't place a block. And by being able to restrict the player from not being able to place blocks in certain locations, really opened up a lot of options in terms of design.
Sort of in hindsight, is there anything you would have done differently in terms of kind of your graphic features, mechanics, working process, you name it?
There are a few things that are coming up that we didn't get to, or something along those lines, that we might be putting back into the game before the Action 53 card release comes out. A few bugs have shown up and stuff. And
oh, cool.
I think there are 1 or 2 rooms in the game, 1 or 2 screens where the difficulty spike is a little strong, like that would need a softer introduction to them, but nothing that's too terrible, I don't think.
Well, it looks like, the projects that you were involved with are getting really good feedback. Everyone seems to be digging them. So I'd say that in itself is a success, but what would you consider to be the greatest success that this project sort of has brought?
Early talks of the game had involved including more dexterity-based playback with like enemies to avoid and lasers and stuff like that. And
lasers?
Yeah.
Laser gerbils?
Why not?
It's a basement,
I like laser gerbils, yeah.
And there was one puzzle I really wanted to get in there, and I'd worked a few versions of it out, and I wanted to have something where the ground underneath you would destroy, and then while you're falling, you pick up an item, and then suddenly you have to use it real fast before you finish the fall. And we tried a few versions of that, and I realized that was the only real dexterity-based puzzle in this whole game. So we decided to take it out, as without it, we have an entire game that's playable by anyone regardless of motor control capabilities. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There aren't a lot of games where you can sit down and you can play them if you don't have the fastest, like, hand-eye coordination or anything. And there was a post, I wish I had Googled it so I could quote them correctly, but there was a post in the nesdev forums, maybe last year or sometime, and someone had said, I really like puzzle games where you can just look at the screen for 5 minutes, decide what to do, and then do it. So I tried to adhere a bit to that, and I think we were fairly successful in that. There are a few things where the game seems like it's a little dexterity based, like there are a few things where you do have to use things while you're falling, but when you enter Cavi Vision, which is the mode where the guinea pig can place blocks, it slows down time Matrix style, so you really have a lot of time to do it, and if you don't do it, you can just try it again. Like there's no death in the game,
That's it takes quite a bit of like design savvy and wisdom to sort of cut those what would be really cool parts, but then, preserve the actual gameplay. So it's pretty neat that you did that. Are there any plans to kind of expand Gruniozerca post-competition? Or shut it? Or sort of where is this going from here?
Well, we, it was originally associated with a charity, so we don't want to go too large or do anything to individually profit off of our efforts. I think the next thing we have in mind is we're working on a level editor for the same gameplay mechanic. And the level editor...
Oh, cool.
Ooh.
We would then maybe put online and let people create levels. And then for next year's charity event, just release a compilation of levels instead of developing a new game from scratch. You know what I mean?
I think 2 of us in this room have already tried that and failed. So
yeah,
best of luck.
Hope yours works better.
The incident was actually our main inspiration on the level editor thing.
Oh,
that's why Kevin brought you on.
That's really nice of you to say, man.
He likes to hear things like that.
I mean, I do, but it's not something I expected to hear.
I'm just kidding with you.
All right. So I think we've touched pretty good on everything. Is there anything else that you'd like to sort of share to the world while you're still on here?
I should mention music. All the music in the game is from Shiru. It's all stuff that he's released under creative. What's the CC? The CC licenses, and it's all some really great stuff. And the contrast that it brings to the game, I think, really helps it a lot.
Yeah.
And Lucas did all the sound effects. They're great.
Speaking of music, do you have a favorite track that you want to send this segment off on?
I guess so. Maybe Encounter.
All right.
Would be the title of the track there.
Okay, we will now listen to Encounter. Thanks so much for coming on. It was great to finally talk with you in real time as opposed to just emails.
Yeah, it was really, really fun finally getting to hear your voice.
Ooh, it is deep. I could fall asleep to this voice.
There are many people that are integral to the nesdev competition, but one of the foremost and most behind the scenes, if I may say, has been Brad Bateman, who we talked to a couple episodes ago. But we're going to talk with him again, sort of about his involvement, what he's been up to, and can you sort of tell us a bit about yourself, Brad, and your role in the competition?
I think I covered it a little bit in the last one, but I just kind of took the reins and made an idea into an actual competition, and I've just kind of been following through with it through the years and trying to keep it rolling so we can see some new stuff.
When did that sort of begin, I guess?
I don't know when the original post exactly was, but the first year that we actually ran it was 2011, and this will be the fourth time that we've ran the competition. So it's getting a lot more common. We kind of missed a couple years here and there, but so far 2016, 2017, and the plan is with 2018 and ongoing.
Was anything in place before you joined, or did you sort of sprout this all?
No, it wasn't just me. I mean, Thread was started on nesdev, and they kind of went through and had a bunch of different ideas, and it just kind of died away. And I'm like, I want to see what people have been working on, because a lot of times in this community, you see a lot of teaser photos or like animations or short little videos, but nobody's actually willing to release what they have or polish something up to a point where it's actually finished. So the whole point of the competition was me trying to push to see these homebrews actually released to the public, or, available for sale, or, whatever.
So you alluded to the fact that there was a thread made at some point to sort of vaguely discuss sort of how the competition would turn out, but how was the format itself sort of determined?
Well, I had kind of asked on the forums, like, if anybody has ideas, and then anybody who had ideas would post them up, and it just got to the point where nobody was, volunteering any more details, so we just kind of made it up and just kind of went with it. And every year we kind of review the previous years and try and figure out what worked and figure out what didn't work, and hopefully improve on that so it's smoother for everybody, and we can just...
Do you remember how much of that was you sort of throwing ideas out, or how much was sort of the community sort of suggesting things?
I don't know if I could put an actual percentage on what it was. I guess it wasn't my idea initially to have like a competition cartridge like we've done in previous years, where we put all the entries onto a cartridge. At least I don't think it was. That was 8 years ago. So my memory doesn't go back that far, but
join the club.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it was decided fairly early on that we were going to stick to just NROM, basically the most basic mapper, so that if we wanted to, we could put it into a compilation cartridge and use it to fund the future competitions.
I know you've had a couple different categories over the years, Category 1, Category 2, with Category 1 sort of being normal games, and then Category 2 being, I don't know, I guess utilities? What's kind of happened to Category 2?
I guess it just kind of died out a bit. I mean, this year there was technically a Category 2, but Category 2 was just a free-for-all category. I don't know, like, anybody who wants to can submit anything to go onto the cartridge. But as far as prizes and judging it's really hard to judge things like, a paint program or a little like music player or a screensaver type thing. Those things are not easy to judge. So it's kind of hard to say, okay, we're going to allot this amount of money to this because, it's worth it. If people want to do these things on the side and add them, that's kind of why we left that free-for-all category out there. So yeah, even if it doesn't work on the cartridge, at least you can get some exposure from Category 2.
Did you say this was the third year or the fourth year?
This is the fourth year.
Okay. So let's say there's been, let's just average, 60 entries total. What have been sort of some of the highlights of the entire overall experience?
For me, what I think is the highlight is it's really clear, because the first one was 2011. It's clear that there has been some definite progression in the community. If you compare, the, 7 from the first year to the 13 that we got this year, just everything about it, the music, the graphics, just how smooth the games play and everything is just so much better. Like, I can't pick a particular game that I think, stands out of the crowd, because this year especially, I find that, there's a lot of choices and a lot of hard decisions to make for the people who are judging the competition.
Yeah, the graphics in particular, I think, have sort of come leaps and bounds, especially this year. There's so many super talented graphic artists that are sort of showcasing their talent.
And I think another thing about this year and even the last year is there's been a lot more group efforts. Instead of just, one guy coding and programming, there's dedicated pixel artists that aren't really into the programming, but they've been hanging out on the nesdev website and Nintendo Age, just showing off their pixel art skills and wanting to be a part of these projects and even commercial projects. So it's really cool that people like that are coming around and helping us out.
Having overseen the competition for so many years, what are you particularly proud of seeing appear?
Well, what I really like is that the communities are just really starting to come together. Like, I know for a long time there's been a lot of animosity between certain people or certain groups that kind of stick to their own stick to their own little corner of the NES homebrew community, but you're seeing a lot of people more willing to give advice and help others out. And I think that's really good because, it can be kind of overwhelming just coming in and not knowing what to do, and to go somewhere and find a friendly voice and have someone who's willing to help or has provided documentation or tutorials or videos to help somebody out. I think that's awesome. And that wasn't around when we first started the competition.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. When these newer people have sort of come in, when they've come into nesdev or they come into Nintendo Age, they don't necessarily have that negative stigma associated with, one side or the other side. It seems like they just want to sort of be there for the betterment of, homebrew in general. They bring their sort of, what they're good at to the table, and that's all they're focused on, making the best game possible that they can. So it's been great, sort of seeing the community evolve to this level. But aside from that, and I got off on a tangent there, I'm sorry. You've done this contest for a few years now, and you sort of had a structure set by this point. But is there anything that you would like to sort of try out in the future or add to the competition?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's one thing that's always kind of bothered me, and that was the way that the judging was structured. Like, not necessarily the categories or anything like that, but the actual submission of games and stuff. Like, this is a community effort. I don't think there's any reason why the community shouldn't be able to vote on, they think deserves to win. As a coder, person who's programming, you look at things a lot differently because you see something that's like, okay, like, I know how difficult that was, but do we need to be focusing ourselves on these special effects, or focus more on content? Or like, it's not just the programmers that should have the say, because it isn't just about us, it's about everybody else as well.
It's very true. Is there anything that you've sort of seen over the years that hasn't really worked and sort of fallen by the wayside? Things that we've sort of shed as we've gone along?
Yeah, definitely. This year in the category 1, we pretty much said no apps or utilities in category 1, just because they're just so hard to judge in comparison to the games. They don't fit into the categories because a lot of times it's like, okay, sure, it fits the criteria for the mapper and everything like that, but you can't really play it. So what's the point? I mean, we did throw around like an app idea a while back where it was just be like really small things that we could bundle together or something like that. But I think just having the 2 categories of games and whatever else works well, because category 2, even though it's not in the prize categories with cash prizes, you still get your name on the cartridge and you get a free game, and you also get you get your stuff published. I mean, that's pretty good.
For sure. I originally signed up for nesdev back in, I think, 2009 when I released Frogger. But it seems like from the start, I'm not a huge presence there, but I've sort of lurked for a few years. And it seems like for a long time, there was this sort of anti-release attitude where like people just wanted to kind of like release things for free, but like not necessarily put them on the cartridge. What prompted the decision for you to decide to like put all these entries on a physical cartridge and release them?
I think the first year with the prizes, it was just donation from community members, like people who had been part of the community for a long time. And so it was just an idea. And Paul from Infinite NES Lives had been working on a bunch of hardware and stuff. And then I think it was Teppels that conceptualized the mapper, and he built the hardware for it. And I guess the rest is history. Just the sale of all the compilation cartridges. That's what we've used to fund everything in the past for competitions, and hopefully into the future, as long as everything keeps selling.
Was there any sort of resistance when you sort of announced that you were going to be releasing it on a cartridge? Was there anyone there that was sort of against that whole idea?
Not that I remember. I mean, I think that's one of the things that actually drew a lot of people to be a part of the competition, because, you know, maybe it's not feasible for their little game to get a full cartridge release, but as part of a compilation, you know, it fit just fine. So I don't think it hindered as much as actually helped.
What is the judging process sort of like? Are there any issues with the balance between sort of fun versus serious projects, or how does that kind of work?
I don't know about balance. I mean, because obviously there's a lot of differences between the submissions, you know, and some of the stuff when you first play it, you don't even understand what's going on, or you think it's broken, but
I know.
Hopefully you'll figure it out. Yeah, I mean, we try and make it as fair as possible. So each person that submits an entry gets to judge, and we say automatically, if you submit an entry, you get to mark yours for full marks. So that way you're not feeling biased, like you're not comparing yours to somebody else's, right? And also incentivizes people to actually do the judging, because we've had people in the past who just, you know, didn't want to do it, didn't want to be a part of it. But, you know, if they're actually interested in winning, then their best chance is to actually vote.
Yeah, because if you're not voting, I mean, there's less of a chance of your individual game, you know, missing out on those full marks that you would give it yourself.
Exactly. Yeah, you're just giving yourself a handicap there that you don't really need.
So I know when sort of things were being determined of how they would be scored or how they would be released, there was sort of a debate on whether people should be able to continue to sort of refine their game after the submission process up into the actual physical release of the cartridge, like fixing bugs or adding features. How did that sort of pan out? Like, what is the result of that discussion? Did you wind up allowing changes to be made?
Yeah, definitely. As for like the actual judging, the rules are basically, you know, deadline to deadline. So whatever you have, submit it, and that is what will be judged. But after that, I mean, now you can, you know, do whatever you want with it. And it's not exclusive to allowing us to put it on the cartridge, because that's one of the things about submitting, is that by submitting, you're also giving us permission to put it as part of the competition cartridge. But we've kind of opened it up and trying to make it as flexible as possible. So, I mean, make changes, fix bugs, make it twice as long.
Were last year's entries as sort of diverse in gameplay, I guess? It seems like this year's entries are all so very different.
Yeah, they are a lot of different. And actually, that's one thing that I like about this competition, or like NES Homebrew in general. Like, gaming itself has changed so much. And like, especially with the indie gaming scene, like there's kind of games you've never seen before. And then all of a sudden people are like, hey, I could do that on the NES. And like, you see like just some strange stuff that you would never see commercially. Let's put it that way. But, you know, as a little game to play or whatever, you know, it's a lot of fun.
I still can't get over Star Evil, but
It's the best.
I can't let it go.
So good. It's so good.
So from your perspective, what did you kind of feel were like the kind of highlights of this year's entries?
I would say the highlights this year is just kind of like Kevin was saying, the variety, you know, like you're going to pick this up and you're not going to get 13 platforming games. You know, you're not like, you have everything. You have puzzles, you have platforming, you know, just stuff you've never seen before.
Yeah, that was one of the weird things about, I think it was the 2014, was that the only platformer like won everything. And it was like, well, maybe there's some extra content to things like PCB Designer by INL.
Yeah, honestly, that was one of my favorite games. And I don't know why people didn't score it that well, but
It seems like platformers generally are sort of what people are drawn to. I know anytime anyone announces like a platformer homebrew, people sort of lose their minds and get excited. So I think it has sort of a leg up. So I'll be curious to see this year if a platformer sort of comes out ahead, or sort of how the overall hierarchy is of the scores of the various projects.
they were very diverse. So it's going to be tough to you can't just like look at them and say that's the clear winner.
Yeah.
You know, they all have strong points.
Mhm.
So yeah, we'll see. There might be some surprises.
No, I'm hoping so. Like, they're just so creative. I still cannot get over some of them.
I think that's one of the main strengths of this competition. Like, if you released sort of a demo in itself, you know, outside of a competition, like, it might easily be overlooked because it's not sort of a full experience as far as like gameplay or a story. You know, people might easily dismiss it. But in the context of a competition, you know, especially for the judges who are sort of forced to play them, really sort of makes you sort of look deeper into them, like it's something you would necessarily maybe dismiss immediately or quicker otherwise. Like, you're playing these games and you're sort of looking at their strengths and sort of what they add, what value they contain. And it's been sort of eye-opening to me because there's been some projects, especially this year, that there's more there than what you might see, you know, from first impression.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. Well, is there anything else, Brad, that you would sort of like to, that we didn't touch on, that you'd like to sort of say to the world?
Yeah, I just want to thank all the people who entered, you know. I mean, this would be nothing without you. And I mean, I hope we see more from everyone in the future, and thank you for everything that you've done and everyone in the community. And the more attention we can bring, the better, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I know a lot of people aren't for the commercialization of their hobbies and stuff like that. And I'm not necessarily either. You know, the word oversaturation has popped up here and there, but I think this is like a community effort, and I'd like to see more of a community effort. Like, I want to see everybody coming together and having a good time and making games.
And for those people who stumbled upon this podcast and maybe haven't known where to go, you know, where the stuff has been discussed, where can they go to find out more information about the competition?
Well, there's usually threads on Nintendo Age and nesdev, but those will all be linked from the website, which is currently nesdevcompo.nintendoage.com.
Okay. Well, awesome, man. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for chatting with us again. And yeah, just for sharing your thoughts about various things.
Hi, this is Doug Fraker, and I go by Dougeff on the nesdev forums, and I've made about 4 or 5 games for the Nintendo. The latest one was for the competition, Jammin Honey. So I guess we're going to be talking about that.
So tell us a little bit about your background. What sort of programming experience do you have, and kind of what else have you sort of done in the community over time?
But honestly, before I started working on games, almost zero programming experience. Like, I took a few classes, but nothing that really prepared me for making a video game. I went through the Nerdy Nights. I don't know where I saw that, but that really helped, and I just kind of figured it out. So really, I've been trying to figure it out since then. But
well, you write most of your games in C, though, right? How'd you sort of come across that knowledge?
Yeah, I don't have like a huge C background myself, so but I think it's a lot easier to figure out the code in C than in assembly. I just thought, it would be easier to figure it out. It actually took me a long time to convert over to the C. And the Jammin' Honey is the first game that I programmed in C.
So what is the sort of the style of Jammin' Honey, your 2017 compo entry? Or 2018, my goodness.
I tried to go like completely retro, like it's early Nintendo, like Donkey Kong style game. It's non-scrolling. You're jumping on platforms, climbing up ladders, you're collecting coins. So it's supposed to be like a throwback to the very early games, like even before Nintendo. I used to play a game called I think it's called Jumpman Jr. on the Atari. Not like the Atari computer, not the Atari console.
It seems like you have really extensive programming knowledge from the tutorials you've done and sort of the posts that you make. So I'm actually surprised that you said you don't have much experience from before you started programming games. But what have your sort of previous experiences taught you that helped you, with this specific competition for this entry?
It's hard to say, what prepared me for the competition. I wanted to make something really small, like really easy. And it just seemed like this would be this idea of like doing something like Donkey Kong would be easy to do. Like the other things that I've done, the Ninja game that I made, that took me 2 years, and that was like 2 years of really hard work. And I just wanted to do something simple because I think I had like 3 months left, and you can't do like a really advanced game in 3 months.
No way, definitely not.
So you started Jammin' Honey, what, in like October then?
Yeah, about then.
Huh. And you did it all in C?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Well, I had to rewrite some of the subroutines in assembly because it was taking up too much room. Like I ran out of room real fast, and just at the end I was just like trying to figure out, because when you write it in C, it's kind of like clunky big code, and you can kind of do things a lot more efficiently in ASM.
So where did the idea come from for Jammin' Honey? Did the mapper, that they're going to use for the competition cartridge, did that help shape things at all, or did it just sort of come out of nowhere?
I don't know. I just sort of I want to do something musical, so that's why she's playing a guitar. And my first sketches were just ladders and platforms, and I just drew a little girl with a guitar. For a while, it was called Guitar Girl.
Yeah, I saw some debates about the what you were going to call it online, and sort of you'd asked questions about it, and that was kind of interesting to see. But then Jammin' Honey works really well.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not really good at coming up with names. Like every single name of the characters in the game, I had like 5-6 different versions of what they could be, and in the end, I'm not 100% happy of how they all came out.
Man, I've had that problem all my life. Anytime I draw like a map, naming cities, characters, whatever, it's always just a crapshoot. Was there anything you were hoping to accomplish in terms of goals, whether programming-wise, life goals, whatever?
I think the goal here was just to make a game in C, just because I have the whole tutorial on how to make a game in C. I thought it's about time I made a game, I made a like a little space shooter game, but I spent like 2 weeks on it. It was not much of anything.
Yeah, it's always funny. Tutorial writers always have that rap of those who can't do teach. So it's good to see actually,
Sort of true, but I got a book now on how to program in C, so maybe I can actually learn it myself. Go back over all the tutorials and actually like figure out what I did wrong. I got a lot of complaints. Somebody posted the tutorials on Reddit, and I got nothing but complaints from people who actually know how to program.
Well, that's Reddit.
Yeah, that's true.
That's the internet. So Jam and Honey, it's got a pretty charming graphical style. Like, what was the creation process like of coming up with the visual style, I guess, how it looks?
I like to draw just with pens and markers, and then I will take a picture of it, take it over to the computer in Photoshop, and just like reduce its size until it looks like something like a Nintendo game.
Huh.
And then actually, I think I bought a new program. What did I get? I got Aseprite. I don't know how to pronounce that.
Oh, I have that too. Yeah, it's a nice little program.
So this was also the first project I used that on.
Good for checking like animations and stuff.
Yeah, it really helps because you can see how you can like click animate, and you can see how all the different pictures go together.
Yeah, what do you normally use? What did you use before that, I guess?
For that, I was using YYCHR.
Yeah, I use that in a combination of paint myself. I am an old school painter, so...
So weird.
What do you say?
Like Microsoft Paint?
Yeah, it's so weird.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who still use that.
Weirdos. All of you.
XP, man. XP for life. So I saw during the development phase you toyed with doing like a black background, sort of like the old arcade-styled games, but then you ended up going with a white background in the end. Sort of, can you tell us about that a bit?
Oh, that's a tough call. You know, like, I was about 99% done, and then I was just playing around with the colors, and the black background looked good. But a lot of the little things didn't work out so well because I think the eyes were white, and I had completely run out of palette colors, and I was using just the background white as the white for the eyes. So when it went to black, it kind of looked weird.
So music is a big part of like the theme of the game with, Jammin' Honey with her guitar and all that. What was it like sort of collaborating with Estlib?
That's tricky because he seems like, I think he's going to college right now, so he seemed really busy. So, honestly, I didn't get a lot of feedback from him. I got a lot of feedback from the nesdev community on, just play tests. That was most of my process was just listening to people tell me all the bugs in my game and trying to figure out how to fix them before the time ran out.
Speaking of bugs, like what was the testing process like? Like how did playing it or like getting feedback help shape the game?
I think it really helps to have a lot of people test the game because they come up with stuff that you never would have thought of, or they are jumping in corners that you never would have thought to jump in. Realize that that's completely broken if you jump way in the corner or way off to the side. Or
Yep.
It's interesting that having other people, I'd like to have someone like actually sit in front of me and play it while they watch, but that doesn't really work out.
Yeah, you never know what people try completely different things that you'd never even think of trying.
Oh, they do. They break your game faster than anything just because they don't know how to play it.
It's the worst.
It's also the best. So, what kind of hurdles did you encounter along the way? What challenges sort of cropped up as you went along?
Honestly, I think the main problem was running out of room. Like, every time I added something, I completely ran out of room, and I had to figure out how I'm going to crunch this, how am I going to compress this. I ended up putting a lot of the data into the character graphics.
Are you happy with how everything turned out? Like, is there anything you would have done differently in hindsight?
I think the ending, like right after you win the game, I was going to have like a butterfly or a bee flying around, something moving in the background. But like I said, I was out of space. I couldn't do that kind of detailed programming for the end of the game. That's pretty much it.
What would you say your greatest successes with the project were?
I liked how a lot of the animations came out.
They are very nice, yeah.
In the past, that's sort of been my weak spot, is coming up with animations that look like anything. I used to do like little blobs that bounce around, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of lame, but...
No, I really liked your enemies with the game. Like, they just had a lot of character to them, and the way that you used the colors and restrictions of the NES were just awesome.
Yeah, I had real problems with the color restrictions on this game. Because you can pick the colors of the girl at the beginning.
Yeah.
She basically uses up 2 full palettes for herself.
Wow.
And I had 1 other palette for coins and movable platforms. So I had like 1 palette left for every enemy in the game.
You've got, what, 4 or 5, maybe 6 enemies in there?
I think there was 5, yeah.
Huh.
Because I had a bee, and that's using one of the coin colors for the bee.
Yeah, I saw that.
Do you have any plans to expand the project post competition, or is it pretty much done?
No, probably not. I like to just move on once something's done and
Heck yeah.
figure something else out.
Anything else you want to share with us, or anything we missed?
I changed the what's the music code called? Famitone. I edited that and I posted that on Nintendo Age somewhere. So it's got a little bit more of the effects. The main one that I care about is the volume.
I'm with you there. I would that's definitely the main thing that's lacking.
I got it working now, so I'm kind of happy about that.
Dang, I like that about these open source projects, that people can just sort of jump in and sort of fiddle with them and make them sort of answer some of those complaints that have been raised over the years. But yeah, so with music being a major theme in the game, is there a specific track you'd like listeners to hear?
You could play the intro, but that's kind of long.
Oh, long is good with us. So yeah, thanks for coming on, Doug. This is great to finally chat with you. I mean, you've done tons in the community that we will touch on another day. And yeah, thanks for coming on. So one of the most exciting projects that's sort of been talked about and sort of discussed on the forums has been a game called Project Blue, which we talked about a couple episodes ago when talking about Franken Graphics and some of her work. But we are actually here with Toggle Switch, the main programmer.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Good.
Pretty good.
Thanks for coming on.
And so you're kind of, I don't want to say new, because I know a lot of people like lurk behind the scenes, but you haven't posted a whole lot publicly. So you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? What else you've maybe done? Is this your first game? First NES project? That type of thing?
Yeah, I've been lurking for probably since 2015 or so, and I tried to program for the Nintendo all the way back in like 2002, actually, and I kind of looked into it a little bit, and the existing documentation at that time was pretty poor, so I kind of gave it up really quick, and then I tried again like 5 or 6 years later, and it was a little easier, and I still just didn't really feel like there was enough out there yet, and this time around when I looked into it, I was like, oh, this is possible now, and people are doing it and doing it well, so I kind of started looking into it, and for me, for a long time, the problem I was having was I'm not a very good artist, and I wasn't very happy with the graphics that I was making, and that was kind of like a big barrier for me to like actually getting serious with it for a while. And then like about last year sometime, I just decided, I'm going to go and find some graphics that someone's posted online for free, and I'm just going to use them to create a project of my own. So this is like the first project that kind of came out of that. And I've just been building it piece by piece from the ground up and trying to, okay, now I need this thing, now I need that thing. And honestly, kind of got a lot further along than I ever expected to, and eventually got to the point where I was like, hey, I could make a game out of this. And at that point in time, I started looking for some original graphics to work with so that we could maybe think about releasing it without stealing someone else's work.
It's amazing to me because, like you said, you've been lurking for so long, and like you weren't really on anyone's radar as far as I know, and you're sort of learning as you go. And when I was checking out the thread that you posted on nesdev about the project, people were asking if it was a static screen-by-screen game or if it was a scrolling game. And then toward the end of the thread, you said so nonchalantly like, oh yeah, it's a screen-by-screen. And doing scrolling was going to be too overwhelming, but now that I see how doable it is, I wish I would have done it. And it blows my mind because scrolling is such like a complicated thing to me personally that you still being new at it, you think you said so surely that you could have done it. That's your confidence it's inspiring to me for sure.
Yeah, I've gotten scrolling working, and with the graphics and everything was fine. I actually had that working at an earlier point in time in this project. But the block I had was, how am I going to fit all of this information into RAM at once? How am I going to have all the collision data and all that stuff stored in RAM at once? And I didn't see how to do it. And now I see that that's actually not so hard, and I figured out how it could be done, but it's really overwhelming working with a Nintendo at first because your resources are so limited. And coming from more modern systems like I am, it's kind of terrifying having such a small amount of variables to work with. And I was just like, oh, there's no way there'll be enough room for that. And I see now how you can store just the data that you need, and it's doable. It's just more complex than I originally thought it would be.
All right, so let's take a couple steps back here. Beau and I have had the chance to play the game, but people listening might not know much about your project yet. So can you briefly describe the gameplay style?
I've definitely gotten a couple of comparisons to Battle Kid, which is not intentional on my part because I've never actually played Battle Kid. But I was inspired when I didn't have scrolling working, and I was kind of frustrated by that. I was inspired by the fact that Battle Kid actually didn't have scrolling either and was still kind of a popular, successful game. So I was like, maybe I don't need scrolling.
Oh, yeah. And
so that's honestly the biggest thing that I took from Battle Kid, but I see the other comparisons. But for me, the biggest inspirations I had for gameplay were definitely Mega Man and Super Mario Brothers. The movement is totally based on Super Mario Brothers, the way that the character accelerates and decelerates, and all that is based on this document I found online that kind of spells out how Mario moves and all the different nuances of his movement. And so more or less the character moves like Mario. He shoots projectiles like Mega Man, has a life bar like Mega Man. And yeah, it's a platformer, so you're just kind of running through and shooting enemies and grabbing coins and evading lasers and pools of toxic waste and stuff like that.
With using or sort of borrowing some of the physics and stuff from Super Mario Brothers, did that make it easier or harder to sort of get going with things?
Well, it's kind of both in a way because it gave me something to compare it to that I was comfortable with and familiar with. And the other nice thing about it was I think a lot of homebrew games are kind of notorious for having poor controls.
Yes.
And so I was like, if I steal a control scheme that's already been well designed by a set of professionals, then I don't need to spend forever trying to get it right, you know? And so it's not exactly like Mario. Like, a lot of the constants have been changed. You can't run as fast as Mario can. You accelerate a little bit slower than he does. But the basic concepts in Mario are almost all there.
I noticed that when I was playing it, that it felt very familiar, and I couldn't figure out like what game that was from, where I could sort of run and like get momentum up and like hold the jump a little harder than normal. And it was Super Mario Brothers once I looked into it. That was great.
Yeah, it's definitely with if you hold down the jump button, you will stay up in the air longer, you'll jump higher. And the way that works actually is the gravity that is affecting you is lower when you hold the button.
Oh.
That's the way it works in Mario.
Huh.
Nice.
I haven't got to jumping and or gravity and all that, so that's interesting. Huh.
Yeah, it was that was like kind of daunting to me. I always was pretty poor at physics. I was usually good at science classes, but I was bad at physics in school, so I was a little scared to do it.
Oh, you did pretty good.
Yeah, you did great. So, when did you start working on Project Blue?
In the spring of last year, the previous Nintendo homebrew competition had just wrapped up, and they had some really good entries last year, some really impressive stuff, and I was like, maybe I could do that. So I was really impressed by, of course, Twin Dragons.
Oh, yeah.
And then there was the, was it Nebs and Debs, or Debs and Nebs? I can't remember.
Yeah.
That one was really great too, and really creative in its gameplay. And so, yeah, I was really inspired by what those games were doing. And I think around that time, maybe Twin Dragons was starting their Kickstarter campaign, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
It would have been April, yeah.
Yeah, that definitely also kind of inspired me when I saw just kind of the movement that was getting, and just to see the reception that those games were receiving has been inspiring for sure.
Yeah, people get excited when they see a good game. It makes you want to make your own. So where did the basic, I guess, idea for Project Blue come from in terms of sort of narrative? I mean, you sort of told us some of the gameplay stuff, but you've got quite a story there.
So basically it started out like, I'm going to create a character, you know, that's based on what I looked like in the 1980s.
Nice.
Which is, you know, I wore denim jackets and blue jeans and, you know, t-shirts, and I was a little 8-year-old kid. A little 6-year-old kid.
I still dress like that, so I'm not sure what you're getting at.
I still wear jeans. I don't really wear denim vests anymore, but that's the general look of the character. So originally, there wasn't really much of a storyline. It was just kind of him running around and blowing up robots. And once I started bringing other people into the project, they started asking me questions, you know, like, who is this kid? What's his deal? What's going on? And so over time, it's kind of evolved a bit. But at this point in time, Blue is a kind of like a street urchin from a city in the future. It's kind of like a cyberpunk future. And he's been kind of kidnapped and artificially augmented by this kind of evil corporation called Omnicorp.
Ah, yes.
At the beginning of the game is kind of him breaking out of his test tube and trying to break out of the research facility that he's kind of been locked inside.
That was a really neat animation that you had when the game first starts and you sort of jump up just a few pixels and then the thing breaks.
Oh, you like that? Cool.
Oh, yeah.
Cool. We're not sure if we're going to keep that or not. Eventually, we want to make it a little cleaner so it's easier to see what's going on, but I felt like it was maybe a little too obtuse at the beginning.
No, I caught it.
Okay, cool.
So, did the title come first, or like, how did you come up with the title, basically?
All right, so this is an interesting story. I used to live in Spain. I was a backpacker for a while in my early 20s, and I was living in Spain and traveling around. And this woman I was traveling with this group of English people, and there was a woman in the group who had a son named Blue.
Ah.
And the name kind of always stuck with me. And then years later, my sister-in-law gave my nephew the chance to name their newborn child, and he randomly chose the name Blue as well. And so his name, that's kind of how the name kind of came about in my head. And then he was, wearing the blue jeans and the denim jacket, so I just kind of called him Blue.
Ah.
And then when we were coming up for the name of the game, was Franken Graphics who came up with the name Project Blue. And that's actually at the point in time where we chose kind of the narrative where he was part of this secret kind of corporate / military project.
I know, like a lot of people with the nesdev competition, they set themselves specific goals, whether they want to make something in particular or they just want to finish something. Like, it's structured so that you actually finish things. Did you have anything in mind or things that you wanted to learn?
My first and foremost goal was to make a game that was about on the complexity level of Super Mario Brothers. And I think in some ways we've kind of surpassed that, and in some ways, we're a little behind it with the, like we don't have scrolling, for example. So there's some ways in which it's not as technical as Super Mario, and then there's other ways where I feel like there's more interaction between objects and stuff that Super Mario doesn't have.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my original goal, was to get something around on that complexity level. And one thing I'm really trying to avoid is there's a lot of people on the forums, and I'm not going to name names, and I'm not putting anybody down, who are substantially better than I am at programming in terms of what they know how to do on the Nintendo. And yet they don't have any completed games. And I think that's because they are focused too much on perfectionism, maybe, and they like, oh, I can do this better and I'm going to do this more efficiently or whatever. And I was just kind of like, I'm trying to avoid that, and like, I want to get this out there. And then on the other side, Franken Graphics, my graphics partner, she's really kind of more of a perfectionist herself, I think. And I think it's a great for us to be working together because I want to get it done. And she's like, yeah, but maybe make it a little better. And so we kind of find a middle ground there. And I think it's working pretty well.
So what is that process like of working together? Like, what's the division of labor?
I've done all the programming. So far, I've done all the sound, but that might change. And then she's done all of the graphics. And we've been splitting the kind of game design and level design. So she will, throw ideas at me that's like, hey, I want to, have this. And I'll say, well, maybe we could do it like this. And she'll say, yeah, but that's not as good as this. And we'll find some sort of ground where it's something that I can implement in a reasonable amount of time and still kind of be, something close to what she's trying to get at.
So what hurdles did you encounter along the way of making this project so far? Like, what was the hardest thing you've encountered?
So many things. Just like, honestly, it's the bugs. It's the inexplicable. Like, there's bugs that I don't know how I fixed them. I don't know why they weren't working in the first place.
Those are the best bugs.
And then, like, literally, like, 4 months later, you're reading a forum thread and you're like, oh, that was my problem. And it was, documented in this one obscure thread in this one place. And, maybe somewhere on the wiki somewhere. I'm not going to put anybody who's, documenting this stuff down. They're doing an amazing job. But the system is so weird that, yeah, there's stuff that has, been confounding me to this day about things that should be really easy. I guess the most annoying one for me has been just weird graphical glitches where I can't figure out why things aren't working, and it just ends up being the weirdest, like, obscurest, well, if you write to this register, it screws up that register type thing, where you're like, how am I supposed to know that?
That's true. 4 months is pretty quick turnaround time in terms of, like, figuring out conceptually why something was going a certain way. It's taken me sometimes years before I actually get the real reason.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, my day job is not very demanding, so
that's awesome.
I have a lot of time to spend just screwing around on this game, which is how I've been able to do it in the time that I've been able to do it, for sure.
Is there anything that you would have done differently, sort of in hindsight, either in terms of mechanics or features, or just the working process that you went through?
Yeah, I definitely, would go back in time and spend 5 minutes explaining to myself how things could scroll. Because I would say the main shortcoming of this game for me as a designer is that we've got the graphics based on Mario, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Mario has a similar style with the acceleration as a game like even something more advanced like Sonic the Hedgehog, right? Where you kind of just want to run and just go and jump over stuff and just go for it, And that's kind of where the fun comes from in those games. And by not having scrolling, I've removed that from the game. And so we've had to kind of design it around different elements. And that's been a fun process, and I think it's worked out really well. But that's definitely my biggest regret, is not being able to kind of rip off that old school Mario, Sonic the Hedgehog style of gameplay where you just go and it's like speedrun heaven.
It would be a different style of game for sure.
Definitely.
I think that it opened up the possibilities for you guys to and it looked like you had done that, when I played through it a little bit. You have, some sort of puzzles to where you don't know that you can jump this direction off screen and then get to another ledge on the next screen. So there's a little bit of fun game design around that too. You guys did good.
No, it's been fun to kind of say, okay, well, we can't do this the stereotypical way that it would be done. So now how are we going to design something new and keep it still within the same template, but have a different, more confined play style.
So what have been the greatest successes with the project so far? I know that doing anything on the NES feels like a success, but is there anything that sort of stands out?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, doing anything is a success. It feels kind of amazing to have a game at this point and to be able to send it to people and have them be like, you made this? Because, I'm kind of a nerdy guy, obviously, and I work on projects here and there. And I've been telling my friends I'm going to make a Nintendo game. And I'm like, yeah, sure. And so when you actually have something and you show it to people and watch them play it, it's pretty exciting. I was able to watch my brother play it a couple weeks ago, and that was great because I just barely got my EverDrive in the mail, so I had been waiting for so long to try it on a real game, on a real system.
Oh, so you actually, I read that you created a whole game editor to sort of make this level creation process easier. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so, a Nintendo screen, to fill it up with graphics, is 1024 bytes of data. And, at first, when you're working through some easy tutorials or whatever, you feel like, oh, you can just enter the numbers and how quick that is. Wow. And then eventually you're like, man, I'm going to enter 1024 numbers to get a screen of data, and that's one screen. And then if I want to edit it, I have to search through this pile of numbers, and no, I'm not doing that. So I was like, how can I do this faster? And I know there are tools out there already, like NES Screen Tool or whatever, but I just kind of wanted to create my own thing. I was like, it's not a very complicated program to build, and I think in the end, it'll end up saving me a lot of time. So basically what it does is it allows you to create palettes. It allows you to take the tile set and create meta tiles out of those, and then you use the meta tiles to build screens. It allows you to build up to 64 screens at once, which I didn't think was a lot, but now that I have the game built, is a ton of screens.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, that first level is long.
Yeah, it's huge. I think we're only going to do 4 levels, so it's not going to be, it's going to be 4 or 5 levels. And I was originally planning to do 8, and then when I saw how big 64 screens actually was, I was like, well, maybe not. And then it allows you to do various things like change the name of the level and stuff like that. And then you click a button and you give it an NES ROM, and it takes the ROM and puts all the level data into the place where the ROM expects it to be, and then you have a game. And so I have this for a couple reasons. First of all, it's great as a design tool for for us to use to build the game. You can you can add objects to the screen, enemies, and all that stuff inside the level editor. So you do all the hard work inside the level editor, which makes it easy and fun work, really. And then you just click a button and have it inside a game that you can use. And what I'm eventually going to do is I'm going to dumb it down massively by taking out a lot of features, and I'm going to release it to the general public so they can make their own levels. And I just am going to have to remove features so that people don't do anything that, breaks the game. And there's stuff that's there that makes sense for us to have access to. But if I give anybody access to it, they're just going to cause problems for themselves and think it doesn't work. So
I had to do the same thing with mine. Just ripped out tons of stuff for that reason.
Yeah.
Your current version, is that easy enough that even Franken Graphics, she can use that to build levels and send them your way?
Yeah. So I gave her like a little 10-minute tutorial video on, here's the basics of how it works, because you build tools for yourself and it seems very obvious how things work. But I know from experience that people have a hard time with stuff like that. So just explained all the ins and outs of it. And when we come out with the real thing for public release, then I'll do something similar. I'll create probably like a 20 minute to half an hour video of me just creating a screen from scratch with a tile set and then exporting it into a ROM and playing through the screen.
So I know when you sort of set out to make this project, the competition was sort of the end goal. Do you have goals that you're like plans to expand the project after the competition? Are you going to sell the game anywhere? Like, what are your plans?
Yeah, so we're releasing the first level for the competition, and that's going to kind of be our demo. And then sometime later this year, probably around the fall of this year, I want to do a Kickstarter for cartridges for the full game. We'll do complete in box. We've actually hired an artist to do kind of box art and label art and manual art for us. And that's going to be part of the Kickstarter as well. We're going to try to do some special stuff for that. And yeah, so I'm pretty excited to do that. But what I want to do is make it so that by the time the Kickstarter happens, the game is pretty much done. And we're not going to say, hey, give us money and we'll get you a game in a year and a half or whatever. We just want to have the Kickstarter to basically raise funds to pay our artist and cartridges, really. Those are going to be the main expenses.
Yeah, they add up.
Yeah, and printing manuals and all that stuff.
Cool.
So yeah, like I said, I'm a big fan of the music, and we are going to listen to the level 1 theme or song. So here is that. Thanks for coming on, Toggle Switch.
Thanks for having me.
Man, so it was really awesome talking to all those guys, huh?
Yeah, geesh, like, just so much stuff to learn about.
Yeah, and we know some of these guys pretty well, but still, like talking to them one-on-one, or I guess it's two-on-one. It's really interesting, sort of learning, what their thought processes were, what their inspirations were. Man, it's been really informative.
Well, there are people too that you've emailed back and forth with for years, but to finally hear the voice is just great. So thank you to all who came on and chatted with us. We really appreciate it, and we will be back next time with more interviews, more people that we've chatted with and that have some great stories to tell.
So this is only the beginning. So if you like what you hear and you want to follow Beau and I on Twitter, I can be found at A Ton of Glaciers. Beau can be found at Soulgoose. And as I mentioned last episode, we did open up a Patreon. So I want to thank everyone that's gone there to donate. It does help us out a lot with the cost of hosting these MP3s. So if you want to check that out, it can be found at patreon.com/NESassemblyline. And you can always email us directly at nesassemblyline@gmail.com if you have any questions or comments. We'll answer the questions on a future episode. We do want to thank everyone for sticking around to listen. We know this was a longer episode than normal and definitely a different structure. So if you absolutely hated it, you can just skip the next episode. And after that, we'll be back to our normal structure. But hopefully there's a little bit in each of these episodes for everyone.
Well, I'm going to warn you now, the next one's even longer.
That's what she said. All right. So do we have some music to take this episode out or what?
Yeah, we are going to play another track from Gruniozerca 2, which I still can't say, but whatever. And it's done by the amazing Shiru, who we covered his game Alter Ego a while ago, but he's a very talented musician. And this one is called Lone Fighter, which you will recognize from the first few levels of Gruniozerca 2. Thanks.